Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the AMS Podcast. My name is Carlos Alcazar, and as always, with me is my smashed associate, Manyninjas.
Hello, everyone. How's it going?
Crickets, crickets, crickets.
One of these days, we will have a reaction, even if I have to play the damn thing myself.
Indeed. So, Manyninjas, we're talking about the glorious 1984 Cold War lame-ass propaganda film, starring Patrick Swayze, Charlie Sheen before the hooker and blow days, and Jennifer Grey before she would star with Patrick Swayze in Dirty Dancing. So we have ourselves Red Dawn, because World War III has never been more lame.
You criticize us now, but at least back then, I'd say, since this is technically just so we're covered the full basis there, yes, this is the original version of the film as opposed to the remake that just came out, I believe, last year off the top of my head. Is that correct, Carlos?
2012, close enough.
2012? Okay, maybe a few more years off. But honestly, the remake is entirely kind of a glazed over, basically. We just modernized the villain kind of deal. But effectively, instead of the, I believe, communist Chinese, which didn't go over too well, we have the original communists, being the Russians and the Cubans. And they have personality. They're nice guys.
Well, at least they try. So, yeah. So, I'll actually read you the back of this. It's pretty succinct. When communist paratroopers descend on a high school football field in Colorado, a group of high school students wage an all-out guerrilla war to save their town and their country! Exclamation point. An all-star cast including Patrick Swayze, Charlie Sheen, and Henry Dean Stanton, who meant probably more in 1984 than he does now, delivered powerful performances in the gripping story of courage and patriotism. I will take umbrage with some of that, but that's just my end of it. Why don't you give maybe your non-spoilery opinion of this first?
All right. Now, what we need to understand is, technically within the framework of the universe that they set up here, they actually have to take a bit of a text slides to describe exactly how the scenario plays out, or could play out, to get to the point where such an invasion could even occur. All in all, the film itself is actually rather amusing, I found. It's not the most intelligent film we've watched, for sure, but it's a fun watch. And it actually goes over pretty smoothly. I can't say I complain. I actually like the film, although they do some weird things along the way. Yeah, no, I have nothing else I want to add to that I can do it at this time. How about you, Carlos?
I just wanted to see if you had any follow-up to that. I was bored out of my skull. I was trying my best to stay conscious. I did take a couple of notes, which helped me stay conscious. As far as the thing is, with most action movies, you grade it on a curve. There's a certain amount of stupidity that you kind of accept that's part of it, which is fine. And this is 1984, so it's Ronald Reagan's America. So you're going to have, the Cold War is still in full effect. But you can have a little fun with that, because really the Chuck Norris movies that we covered were also in, Ronald Reagan's America. And when you have missing in action, the ultra-patriotism was in full effect in the early, mid-'80s especially. And then, crescendoed lovely right around, say, Rocky IV, where Rocky single-handedly ended the Cold War, for those of you that don't know. At this point, this went the other way. So, as Manyninjas alluded to, you had a slideshow right at the outset of the movie, which doesn't give away anything. It's just the backdrop for how do you end up with World War III? Well, the United States becomes isolated from everything. NATO dissolves, which will, in like a worst-case scenario, plausible scenarios in the early 1980s, because the USSR was still really influential. It did have a lot of allies. The Cubans were still seen as kind of a big threat to go along with their allies. And really, China was also still... So you had the three the three communist kind of powers, so to speak. So you had China, who, wasn't as big then as they would become now. China is now the prominent player of those three, really. Cuba's pretty much fallen off the map. Cuba's still there. The embargo of the United States remains to this day, but really it's more along the lines of...
I don't think the embargo is there anymore, actually, now that you mention it.
Well, I don't think you could... If you're in the United States, you can't fly into Cuba. You can't.
Well,
you have to go to Canada.
I think they lessened some things. They might be still there, but it's heavily reduced.
You still can't fly a plane from the United States. You can't fly a plane from Florida into the United States. If you're in America and you want to go to Cuba, you go to Canada and then you fly to Cuba.
Okay, that makes more sense because you said you couldn't find a plane. I can't talk right now. You couldn't fly a plane from Florida into the United States, which actually might be a good idea. There's some weird stuff in Florida.
Yeah, indeed. But the thing is, if you're in the U.S. and you want to go to Cuba, you have to go to Canada and then immediately hop on a plane to Cuba. And Cuban cigars are still technically illegal. So the thing is, like, realistically, it's not really a thing that they obsess over. But at the same time, Cuba and the U.S. still aren't trading partners. They don't necessarily agree on a lot of things or get along that much. They're just not actively fighting each other. Yeah.
All right. I think it's safe to say that at this point we're about to jump into the generally spoiler part of the review. Am I right?
Yeah, I think that's fair with a backdrop. But before I do, I will say, as I said, I was kind of bored out of my skull. The biggest reason why is because it felt for me, and again, without really giving anything away, it felt like you actually did have a good cast of good actors. And then people who would either become good actors or people that would have long careers to varying degrees and then had, good things coming in the years that follow this. But it felt like a lot of it was like, because it's a very patriotic film, it tries very hard to sell this idea, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on the other side. So go for it. Give the people a countdown before we go into spoilers. By the way, as a setup to it, so this is the way we run it. We've given you kind of our short opinions on it. If you'd like to go watch the movie first and do that, by all means, help yourselves. If not, we're going to spoil the movie after the ninja stops counting.
All right, and we'll be going into spoiler territory in 5, a 4, a 3, a 2, a 1. And now we're in spoiler country. Let us proceed.
So in spoiler country, my first biggest problem with it was certain silly things. Like at the outset of the movie, there are two things that stick out to me, and they're little details that I'm like, if you're going to try so hard to sell me on this idea, at least get the little details right. The premise is that the communists basically, as the the overview from the back of a box says, paratroopers come down onto this otherwise inconspicuous little town in the middle of nowhere of the United States. Supposed to be middle America or whatever. So you basically get this really, really short setup, because it's a short setup. You basically meet Patrick Swayze, you meet Charlie Sheen, you meet a couple of the other kids right off the bat. This is your entire establishing shot. You've got basically them driving to school in a truck, going to school. So they're going to their regular high school students. So, they establish this with all of maybe 5 minutes worth of things. And then almost immediately in the background, while the teacher is giving a lesson, which is supposed to be foreshadowing of the way that Genghis Khan fought wars, guerrilla warfare, beautifully foreshadowing. You've got paratroopers falling in the background, which you can see, going in the background. And that's your setup to the beginning of the film.
All right, so that lasted, or the foreshadowing lasted within the first 5 minutes or so. Is when we get the scene of paratroopers just dropping into a random field.
Yep, I'm just going to switch over to the shot here. 1 second.
Another thing, but this probably inspired some stuff in the Command & Conquer video game series. I wouldn't be surprised. This seems very familiar to something I would have seen in one of the games.
No, Command & Conquer was fun.
Now. You're right, but still.
I played enough Red Alert that I refuse to have you besmirch the name of Command & Conquer with this crap.
Yeah. So, within the first 5 or so minutes, well, I'll say generously 10 minutes, although it really was the first 5 or so, we have sudden surprise Russians, because they're all basically Russians at this point, drop out of the sky, start taking over the school, and start kind of spreading out everywhere. We'll eventually learn exactly that this, of course, wasn't an isolated incident, but basically you have Russians dropping out of the sky, most literally, and basically just shooting everything up. And the only people that can get away are a handful of people, which basically means, in this case, from what we see, a bunch of the kids and Patrick Swayze in a truck. Okay. Most of them being in the back of the truck, as they just could barely climb in.
Now, can I add a point about this? I'm going to leave this screen, this little screen grab here up here. I want to make a point. So you can see all the paratroopers coming down, and you can see the truck driving away. So this is after a little scene where, in reality, you'll see the truck, and as they're driving away in the truck, you have the various Russian troopers opening fire on different people, shooting up cars, taking people down. But despite all the bullets they seem to be, giving off in their AK-47s, they seem to be capable of killing more than a handful of people at a time. Like, they do manage to kill people, including the school teacher gets it literally in the first couple of seconds because he decides to just stupidly walk outside, sees military people loading up their weapons, setting up mortars, doing all these things, and decides to have a conversation with them where he gets blown away for his trouble. But the thing is, Patrick Swayze and the kids in this truck are driving by in the middle of everything, and for some reason, nobody bothers to really open fire on this truck and take them down inside of the first 10 minutes of this movie.
Well, no, they did try. They failed.
There were people that were literally standing there. 1 second. I'm gonna take off the screenshot for a second. Give me one moment. I need to emphasize this here, and I'm gonna come back. There were Russian troopers, presumably Russian troopers, who literally were standing there with their guns, just pointing them as this gigantic, old-style American truck is driving by them. Really, it's physically impossible to miss this truck at that range. And they couldn't hit it with a single bullet or even come closer. In fact, some of them weren't even firing at it, despite the fact it's driving right in front of them.
And the people who fired were missing horribly. What is the Russian equivalent of stormtrooper? Because that's what we had here.
Pretty much. And I was not terribly impressed. So that's my first thing on that is just literally, no, guys. These douchebags should have been taken out inside of the first 10 minutes. In fact, the movie should have been over at this point. They got shot up, the Russians took over the town, and let's move on with our lives. Chuck Norris will save us. It'll be fine.
Okay. So, all right, very early in the film, the town basically gets taken over, or at least there's a bunch of invasions. The kids basically start moving towards the outskirts of town, hoping to hide out there. Because apparently they decide getting out of town is the easiest thing to do. They realize that very early on. Although, also this early on, we realize that there is a conflict going on, because as they would have been stopped at a roadblock, and were getting shot at the roadblock, an American helicopter basically takes out the blockade that was shooting at them. So apparently, there's already some level engagement going on, despite this being a surprise attack, which means this probably wasn't even the first town hit.
Indeed. Now, can I offer an explanation as to how the kids managed to get help at the most perfect and opportune moment?
Sure.
Obviously, in America, if you're a teenager in 1984 who can afford a brand new Rolex Submariner, as Patrick Swayze can driving here, which is actually one of the first things I caught as I was driving by. Now, admittedly, I'm a watch guy, so I enjoy that kind of thing. But I did think it was fantastic that you're trying to sell me that a young Patrick Swayze in the middle of nowhere America can not only afford a brand new Rolex Submariner, but is, lovingly sporting it right here in this lovely shot that I took from that scene right before they are about to run into the blockade. And Charlie Sheen, as you can tell, is emoting beautifully his own terror, while the third guy is actually kind of stoned and has no idea what's going on.
You see, that's actually why the Russian soldiers wanted them in the first place, to explain, in this entire area, how is it he can afford a watch like that? There are questions.
I'm just saying, in the early 1980s, one of those things did not go for the price that it goes for today. But even then in 1980s, since Patrick Swayze is established, like I said, they try to set up the background within the first moments. It's established that he's working at a service station. Well, this service station pays quite well in 1984 America. Thank you, Ronald Reagan.
So, alright. Skipping over the initial thing. Now I see you have a screenshot. We basically see that the communists are broken up into two blocks. There's the Cuban side and the Russian side. And the Cuban side is led by, I don't remember, what was his military position?
Colonel Bella.
Colonel Bella. Colonel Bella is basically portrayed as I'm a bad guy, but I'm not a bad guy kind of figure that they like trotting out every now and then between most of the action scenes.
What you don't understand, what you have to understand here. May I offer a little context here for this?
Sure.
My theory on it. I'm not actually, I'm not saying that I haven't read up anything on the thinking behind this, but I'll offer my theory on this. I think it really breaks down to, yes, Cuba had strained relations with the U.S., but much like today, it's more along the lines of being a matter of course at this point. The Russians were the real the Red Army was the real communist enemy, quote unquote. The Cubans more or less were communist because it suited their purposes, so they weren't treated in quite the same way. So you kind of have the Russians here portrayed as the real bad guys and the idiots, whereas, the Cubans are played as like, all right, we have a problem, we're trying to deal with it. At one point he tells the Russian guy, you know what, I'm like you, I'm a policeman. And then he's also trying to offer advice to him because he's looking at it from the standpoint of, these are guerrillas. I understand this because in Cuba, a lot of the ones who were in the revolution fought as guerrillas. So they tend to, they're portrayed here as being more sympathetic to the concept of a small guerrilla fighting force, patches of resistance, as opposed to a full-scale army fighting them in that way.
Generally, yes. Mostly the way he expresses himself and British things is written down as like, I'm not used to being I'm used to being opposing the occupying force. Now I am the occupying force, and he's clearly throughout the entire course of the film not comfortable with that.
Yes, so I think it ends up being a lot of the only real, I think, successful character drama, and I'll put up a different screenshot here for everybody. The only real successful character drama, I feel, in a sea of overacting and attempts, was that Colonel Bella is actually trying to tell the story that he is reluctantly participating because, well, he's here, this is what he's doing, but at the same time he is a little bit more sympathetic with the guerrilla group that ends up developing, just because it's more like what he had been used to back home and what led him to being in the Cuban army in the first place. Now, I took this screenshot because I thought this would, this would be appreciated for Manyninja's sensibilities. Because, Manyninjas, do you know what this man is saying at this precise moment in this movie?
Yeah, basically, he's the father of two of the main protagonists that are still in part of the resistance at this point. And I believe he's yelling, asking his children to avenge him. Which
specifically, at the very moment his mouth is opening here, he's literally, avenge me! Which I thought was hysterically funny, considering moments ago he had tried to preach to them about this composure, and he goes, boys, avenge me! And
yes, I would say he was attempting to distract guards that were approaching their area, but when you think about it, wouldn't all that yelling actually attract the guards to your position in the first place? So I don't know what he was doing there. Clearly, he just wanted to be avenged.
And avenge me! This is actually the one part that in this early part of the movie that literally made me laugh.
Yeah, it was not poorly. It was not well acted. It was funny, but not well acted.
It's arguable there isn't a lot of good acting. Now, may I offer you an image of what we consider to be a shell-shocked teenager? Here it is. This is a shell-shocked teenager. She totally doesn't just look stoned.
Clearly, the various things they were getting while they were hiding in the woods, there was some medicinal product there. And then you have just this crazy kid.
Now, I love this guy. May I say, in a sea in this movie that I actually hated most of it. By the way, if you'll notice, Charlie Sheen is seriously emoting here. Like, this is early Charlie Sheen here. This is when he was actually an actor and wasn't just, coked up and crazy.
This is what led him to be coked up and crazy.
Could be, very well. Bad memories of his, 1984 war that he fought with Swayze. He just couldn't accept that they had not actually fought in World War III. But this guy right here, right beside Charlie Sheen, he's one of the early highlights of this movie, if nothing else, because they basically, considering how long this movie drags on, because it comes close to 2 hours, it feels like it takes 8 for this thing to develop. But even in the context of that movie, It feels like it takes minutes for this kid to develop from a scared teenager to a borderline all the way into serial killer. Which is phenomenal. Like, he's literally pointing the gun out while they're talking. Basically, now he's all gung-ho about taking on the communists because it means he can satisfy his bloodlust.
World record sociopath.
It was fantastic.
I like his moxie.
Also, at the same time, I did enjoy that without any real montage, these kids who had, like, backgrounds in, like, Eagle Scouts and crap, they managed to go from that to now we're fully trained guerrillas. Let's check out their lovely trap here.
Wait a minute. Just before we continue, was this before or after they ran into the one crushed Air Force pilot?
Before.
Okay, before. So they kind of figured this stuff out on their own.
Correct.
Well, at least it would kind of fit in that clearly Patrick Swayze's character is older than he seems, and clearly, based on the father figure there, they're all screwed up as hell.
But you don't understand. They must avenge him. And they're doing so by... Clearly, Swayze has been training for the insurrection for years. Because, this is a pretty good plan. Manyninjas, looking at this picture, can you kind of break down how this trap works, Give a little explanation.
All right. Here's the build-up here. What you see in the background is what's the ruined part of a now destroyed tank, as I believe it was the shell-shocked teenager came there, was purposely harassed by some of the people who were in the tank, some of the riders there, 3 total, give or take, not mentioning one that was probably still in the tank. Purposely, they stole her goods, which is a basket. The basket itself included an explosive, which they put in the actual tank, blowing up the tank interior and killing someone inside. So, pissed off, they decided to go chase after the girl, who ran purposely to this field, where they apparently had the rest of the gang waiting in holes that they had dug up, with improvised doors to kind of mask themselves there, which they would pop out of and shoot with AK-47s, which I don't know how they got at that point.
Oh, do you don't understand? At that point, they were already well established into guerrilla tactics and had been stealing weapons as they marauded in that section of the countryside. They just didn't waste time.
Which, basically, I insist that this would actually make sense because this is after the Avenge Me scene, and clearly, whatever harsh reality that the child had there, or that the children had of their father was, if the kids were screwed up, the father was really screwed up. I'm planning this sort of shit all along.
I'm just saying, this was Doomsday Preppers before Doomsday Preppers became a thing.
Oh, so, and this is the rifle of the screwed up kid, the sociopath?
I believe it is, yes. If I'm not mistaken, this is basically the camera angle. Now, I know it's going to seem like we're glossing over a lot of things, but we're really not. Because it was really great gobs of nothing for large periods of time. As a point, I'll click on it. Sorry, I didn't put the picture up first. Now you can all see it. So basically, at one point, the merry band of children is joined by a actual military pilot who ends up crash landing. At first, they discover him and, of course, walk right up to him before effectively, questioning him. After he basically proves he's American, he joins their merry band. And even as he's hanging out with them and they're starting to make plans, he happens to turn around as he's walking away and he looks and notices that the kid, one of the kids is already taken to counting his kill count on the butt of his knife because you see now he's a hardened, grizzled veteran of war, obviously.
Yeah, I believe the expression or what he said there, that being the pilot there, it's like, that's...
I haven't put. Right now, we're looking at you. So we're looking at you. So don't ruin the moment.
Yeah,
we'll get there in a second.
All right. So basically, the pilot there is like, kid, all that hate's gonna eat you up. To which he responds in a deadpan tone, "Well, it keeps me warm. And I just keep scratching away because this is one messed up kid.
Fastest serial killer ever."
The kid had some moxie. I'll give him that.
Now the best part is
moxie.
Yeah. So, our pilot basically helps them with legitimate military tactics as they, establish one campaign. And, they run into some people and discover that there's a possibility there may be some, Green Berets that may come to assist them as they've, been increasingly successful in their guerrilla campaign. But, of course, we can't build enough drama if the kids, salvation looks like it's coming if they can last that long. And if, their friend from the actual military can help them, oh, wait, never mind. Oh, darn. You know what? Well, it was a good run.
Yeah, well, clearly they had to have some people start that. So, in this case, one of the kids plus... damn it. I know his name was Tanner. I don't remember his position off the top of my head.
I don't remember.
Yeah, well, basically, the pilot, Tanner here, ended up biting it during an unplanned incursion into an actual battleground where there was kind of a tank battle still going on. They managed to take out the tanks that were attacking the American side, but not before getting shot up and blown up themselves.
Indeed. This was the first of many, increasingly glorious plans as their numbers start dwindling and we, increase the dramatic tension, quote unquote.
We're reaching the third last quarter there, so we have to start killing off some of the kids, of course. So after that initial scene with Tanner and one of the kids going off.
Now, one second. I'm right now looking at you. We're about to get to that.
All right.
I just want to make one quick point. Because, to be honest, we're going to kind of gloss over a good chunk of what happens here in the ending, only because there isn't really that much that happens in the ending. However, Go ahead and set this up, and then I'll put it on. Go ahead.
All right, so we're down one pilot, one kid. A little bit later, it becomes clear they introduce a new Russian figure, new strategist, who basically suggests new ways to hunt down the kids because they've been clearly doing so terribly a job at it up to this point. Which, okay, we come to the next scene after that, or some other later scenes, which includes the kids are basically being hunted down by men who apparently have a device that's managed to track them, meaning one of them, there's a tracing device somewhere in there. Which means, once they realize and figure out how to get it to work, that one of them has a tracking device on them. In this case, it was one of their own who'd been forced to swallow it, because despite seeing how overrun the town was, much earlier in the film, one of them decides to go back into town again, got caught, and basically, under threat of torture, ingested the device. The rest of the group does not take this well. But, in this case, one of them really not well.
All right. Now, I'll join in here and take over. Let's put it on the screen here. There we go. So, Patrick Swayze, in reality, as part of the ensuing battle, they managed to kill most of their ambush, the attempted ambush, because they had situated themselves well. But having discovered the traitor in their midst, Swayze stands him up right beside one of the Russian, their own little Russian POW that they managed to capture. So when they couldn't get anything out of him, Swayze shoots him with his pistol. And then he's going to shoot the traitor, but he hesitates because, it was one of his own guys. And of course our serial killer takes care of this by pulling the AK-47 on him and shooting him in the stomach a bunch of times. And then he ends up bleeding all over him, and he looks at it and effectively walks away.
He walks away. It looks more disgruntled, like, well, there goes my snow ammo, or my snow camo. Now it's covered in blood. I'm going to have to wash this out.
And I just want to emphasize here, look at Patrick Swayze kind of recoiling in horror as the kid's being shot. The kid's had his hands on his gut. The girls in the background are, like, mortified. And Charlie Sheen is like, what?
No, everyone is mortified because they realize, even under the best circumstances, like, if Tanner was still around, it's like, kid, you've got some serious darkness in you. There's some serious evil there. And this just gave an excuse. This gave an outlet. This was one of the few moments at the tail end of this movie that legitimately made me laugh. I was like, dude, has nobody picked up on the fact that this kid is a fucking serial killer at this point? Like, he's lost it. He's lost the plot, to use vernacular. Like, really, guys, I wouldn't hang out with this guy much longer. I'm just saying. Fortunately, they won't have to. Now, we're just back to you here. Now, let me set up this next bit here for a second. I just want to get your thoughts. I just want to make a point here. So this continues on into the, the winter season ends, and, effectively in this movie, they're trying to convey. So I'm just looking at you while we're talking here. All right.
So they're trying to convey that the seasons are going. So as the seasons proceed, they're still kind of fighting along. They reach a point where they've managed to find some food off the back of a truck. And as it is, it's basically another trap.
Yep.
Now we're going to explain in a second what the Russians have. But one of them gets shot. Now, I'm going to pull up this scene here, the reason, and I'll explain why I wanted this scene up here. All right, so we can see Patrick Swayze, and we can see, his future co-star, Jennifer Grey. They're chilling out here. Keep in mind, at this point in this scene, she has been shot repeatedly. She looks fine. She looks just dandy right here, is all I'm trying to say. Like, she's basically holding on to him. A moment ago, she had to be dragged off the ground to get her away from the gunshots that she had taken. Now, let me see if I can switch to the right screenshot here. And here she is a few moments later after she realizes, oh crap, I've been shot a bunch of times. I should probably fall off the horse.
Well, they didn't. It's not so much fall off the horse as I think the horse got shot.
No, the horse was fine. She fell off the horse on her own.
Yeah.
Swayze had to turn around on the horse.
You didn't mention what shot her in the first place, though.
I know. I was waiting for that one. Please explain how this woman got shot.
All right, so everyone, after picking up the food that had fallen off the back of one of the communist trucks, which they come out, pick up, and start eating from, it's like everything seems like, okay, nice, copacetic. You would have actually assumed the food was going to be poisoned. But no, it was just kind of I suppose, bait they were watching from the distance to see where they hid. So not one, but at least 3 to 4 different attack copters, nice, huge, white attack copters, come out of nowhere and start shooting the hell out of everybody.
Now, I'm just going to go back to you, and I'm going to make a point. That was fucking fantastic. 3 attack helicopters to take out these stupid kids. And they still couldn't take all of them out on 3 goddamn horses. 3 horses are defeating 3 attack helicopter groups. It's fantastic.
Well, technically, they did not so much defeat them as only one of them actually got shot down, I believe. Just one.
No, the helicopter didn't actually get shot down.
Oh, wait,
the guy on
they
the
just
helicopter
took out one of the gunners.
Correct.
With an RPG. The copter itself didn't go down, but realistically, their attempts to round off and shoot everyone down were mostly less than successful. We have, are we looking at me or these?
We're looking at you right now, and I'm about to go to it, and go ahead.
Yeah. So, of course, in a hopeless situation, we have to have a resident sociopath trying to take on an attack helicopter with his assault rifle. To which they didn't shoot him down right away, because they were probably wondering, I was like, what the hell's wrong with this kid? And whatever the Russian equivalent is like, this kid's pretty evil. Take him down. And they finally save everyone in the film, because he would have killed everybody otherwise, by shooting this kid down.
What was great, though, is that he literally decides he's going to take this on. He's going to, this is going to be his last stand. So he screams, the team, the group, the commandos called themselves the Wolverines after, the local high school team. So now they're the Wolverines. So, he puts his scarf over his mouth. He grabs his gun. He points it up. He screams Wolverines and then just opens fire as he tries to, take on directly an attack helicopter as it's shooting back at him.
Regrettably, he was not actually Chuck Norris or Rambo, so this was a failed strategy.
Oh, he tried, This is so that's the last shot of that. So, let's have one final moment of reflection on a young serial killer who was taken down early in his prime. I would have played taps, but I don't feel it would be appropriate here. Just tragic.
I don't feel that this kid is appropriate for this broadcast as a whole. He's not appropriate for the planet Earth. He's one messed up child.
Oh, it's so good. All right, so I really don't want to talk too much more about the movie. The bottom line is I'll just kind of zip to the end because really it gets pretty boring after that. The final stand, more or less, is it comes down to 4 of them. It comes down to Patrick Swayze, Charlie Sheen, the brothers, and it comes down to not Jennifer Grey because she was killed off earlier that we talked about. To the other girl was Leah something, played by Leah something. I can actually let me look it up just so that we can, so I can include it in here because she was an actress that was in a lot of things in the 80s as well, I believe. Leah Thompson, yes, Leah Thompson. So and she was in some stuff, yeah. She was in Back to the Future, a couple of them. Oh, all 3. Yeah. So yeah, she was doing some. She had some stuff going on, especially in the 80s. There was quite a bit there. But regardless, the important part is that, yeah, and she's had a long career. She was in Carolina City, yeah, a bunch of stuff. So anyway, so it ends up being her and one of the other kids. So the thinking of Charlie Sheen and Patrick Swayze is that they're going to make like a last stand. They're going to basically create a big enough distraction by, gunning down, shooting down, blowing up, doing whatever they can to be a big enough distraction to allow them to get away out of. And we didn't really address it too much, but I'll just put it this way. In the premise of this World War II world, the United States was being fought by, all these communist forces. They had come to invade, and they managed to invade, different parts of the country, come up through Canada, do all that. This was all explained by the pilot who gave the broader perspective of what had happened. The reason why it ended up being this ground warfare kind of thing was that, as it was in the 80s, the prevailing thought process was if they had ever gone to a real war, the superpowers, it likely wouldn't be nuclear, only because by the early 1980s, if the two sides had gone nuclear, it would have destroyed everything. Because the U.S. had so many nuclear weapons, they could have launched them into Russia and Cuba, and it would have devastated the countryside and made it uninhabitable forever, basically. And similar to the United States would have been hit with enough nukes that it would have been largely uninhabitable as well. And the fallout would have been huge, and different parts of the world would have been affected. It didn't seem like a viable strategy to win, so it almost, in the world of this movie, it seemed to make more sense just to engage in a ground war. Try to get a sneak attack in, try to be the first to invade, and then try to take over, as much land as you could. By the time that this is happening, there's an occupied zone and then a free zone. And the people in the free zone are sending like radio messages to try to keep the encouragement in the occupied zone, but the lines have kind of stabilized. So basically at this point it's just a war. It's almost a bit of a stalemate in this World War III because the United States is partially occupied, partially free. People are still fighting conventional military forces, and then little guerrilla groups like what this one is supposed to represent. So the tail end of this is they're trying to get their friends who they have fought with into to give them enough time to flee and get out of this area because it's still 40 miles inside of occupied territory. They've got to make it at least 40 miles to get to the free zone. So that's the last stand of these people. And then, do you want me to just recap the last part?
Yeah, if you could just recap it quickly.
Yeah. So all that happens is they end up doing this. They end up creating the distraction they want. In the course of the distraction, our strategist, our general or colonel or whatever ends up happening. Not the Cuban one who is the good bad guy, but the really bad guy, the straight Russian one. He ends up they end up attacking, taking down a lot of people, blowing up a lot of things, creating a lot of havoc and the distraction they wanted to do. Charlie Sheen gets shot. Patrick Swayze is shot and hurt, and he ends up carrying Charlie Sheen. And as he's carrying his brother away, Charlie Sheen, again, before the hookers would blow, would have clearly made him impervious to all these weapons if Tony Montana has taught us anything else. Also in the 80s. The Cuban guy, Colonel Bella, has one final chance. With his AK-47, he can totally take them down. They're unarmed at that point. They're pretty much standing right in front of him at point-blank range. He can take them both out at that moment. At that moment, it is where Bella has lost his stomach for the whole thing. He was already, moments ago in a scene they were showing, contemplating, he was planning on resigning anyway. He wanted to just walk away from the whole thing and go back home because he had no interest in being part of an occupying force, given that his background had been in being the insurgents. That was his background. So now he's fighting insurgents, and it didn't really sit right with him. I think for Bella was the only one who really had almost like a real character development thing in it. The rest of it was just like, other than our serial killer, the rest of it was just, oh yeah, you become battle hardened by this war, and we're supposed to feel bad for you because of all these bad things that have happened to you and your family, and you're fighting for your freedom and whatnot and whatever. But in reality, for me, it was a descent into really not caring, and it's not interesting enough to hold my attention anyway. So we let him go, and then the last scene we see of Patrick Swayze and Charlie Sheen, they're there. Charlie Sheen is kind of bleeding out. He's losing consciousness. Swayze is hurt. They're sitting on a park bench, hugging it out. and it's never stated clearly what happens to them, but it's assumed they're killed. And then you have an epilogue, World War III eventually ends, and the rock where they had been scratching the names out of their dead into the rock becomes a monument. It becomes a monument, to symbolize, in much the same way war monuments become a thing.
Yeah. Technically, also, it's, just to mention, the park that they went to is implied to be one where they had played as children.
Correct.
Younger children.
Yeah, it makes it more tragic, you see. The loss of innocence and youth and other crap they really reached to try to get something out of what really was just a really bad propaganda film that doesn't stand up, in my opinion.
Generally, the better parts of the film would be anything involving Bella, I found, and just because of the inadvertent comedy, anything involving the horrible serial killer, which is the real reason that Bella left the country. Because he knew that kid was screwed up, and while they were glad that he was dead, they weren't sure he wouldn't come back to life somehow, and this wasn't, in fact, a horror movie of some sort, so he didn't want to take his chances.
And I feel that's really a legitimate concern that I would have had myself.
Yeah.
So any other closing thoughts on the film there that you'd like to hear?
Down in a nutshell. The one thing we did kind of skip on during the description of how the battle lines were going, it's kind of comical that in this initial version of this first film, the Americans were getting some assistance actually from the Chinese, who would later end up in the remake becoming the enemy forces.
That is true. You do make a good point. It is kind of an interesting angle they took on it, but also a historically fair point because although the Chinese were communist, by the 1980s, the USSR and the Chinese had pretty much had a falling out. They were communist, in ideology, but they had very different mindsets in terms of how to approach what they thought was supposed to happen. The communists wanted to do like a worldwide thing. The Chinese only really cared about the Chinese, necessarily.
Yeah. So, I think realistically we've covered just about everything.
Indeed. So you want to give it the Russian Death March? You want to, I'd really rather play Red Alert 2. So did you have any, final thoughts? I pretty much gave mine away already. I said I thought that there were some funny things. I thought that it could have been done, even what they were trying to do, I think could have been done better. They had good enough actors that they probably could have done if they just hadn't tried so damn hard to push look at the tragedy, the loss of youth. Oh, look how tragic it is. There are movies, war movies, that have taken this theme and done a much better job of it for the descent of man, or whatever you want to call it. Basically the what's it called? What's the Lord of the Flies? Basically the Lord of the Flies thing. In the situation where you push far enough, and the moral compass of the world is kind of removed, what happens? The descent, the way that you become kind of animalistic, you become hardened by the world around you. That whole theme is not a new theme. It's just they tried to do it, and they tried so hard to sell this idea. In the end, watching this movie, I felt like yelling at anyone who could do something about it, "Avenge me!"
I don't know. Such hurtful feelings. Normally reserved for a Steven Seagal film.
Avenge me!
There we go. So generally, in terms of the film, I found it amusing. I can't say I've seen the new ones, so I can't tell you whether or not it's better. But you have Patrick Swayze doing his thing before he really got famous there. You have some inadvertently comedic moments. You have one really evil child who was just waiting for an excuse to kill. I can't say I'd recommend the film at full price, but at this point you're going to find the film cheap. And realistically, if it pops up on Netflix, okay, fine, sure. Other than that, I can't say I'd recommend it. There are better ways to spend a few bucks even. You know what you should spend your money on? Command & Conquer Red Alert. I think we can agree that one's a winner.
I'm just saying. Still out there.
Yep. No, that's actually all the Tiberian stuff, so no. No, I don't have my red alert stuff handy.
Yeah. But anyway, I think it's a fair capsule. So that'll be the end of that one. So we'll be back, next time around. We haven't decided what the next set of movies will be. We will discuss that, and then we will come out with the next one. We've got kind of a recording schedule sort of set out. It just depends on timing. It depends on how busy things are. I really don't want to record one unless I've actually had the chance to really sit down and watch the movie properly. I took the time to watch this one out and really sit down and look at it. My history background kind of helped me because it's really a story of alternate history. So it's nice to just think about it in the context of what actually happened, the thought process at the time. If you view it in the context of the time period, the movie makes more sense. In 1984, it would have made more sense. But at the same time, even then, I think it kind of, if you're just going to drum up the patriotism card, there are ways to do it where it's just over the top and funny. Even if you're trying to tug at heartstrings, I don't think it got there. So that's just for me. It just didn't get there. So I think that's it. Shameless plugs, Manyninjas.
All right. Well, right now, in terms of what I'm doing for my own channel, I'm realistically doing a combination of retro ninja gaming stuff. I have a general idea of what I want to do for the next game, or so I just need to get more practice in. But it's probably going to be something ninja themed for that game. And on the side, I've actually been recently playing a blind run of the Way Forward game, Shantae Risky's Revenge Director's Cut, off the Steam platform, since I basically picked up some odd stuff with that related to some charity stuff earlier, and I've been getting a little bit of usage out of it here and there. So I've been playing that stuff for recording, and not for recording, but for my own personal fun, Fist of Jesus, The Bloody Gospel of Judas, which is an Adult Swim game off the top of my head. Fun little beat 'em up. I don't know who we're looking at this point with the camera.
We've been looking at you the whole time. All right, so you're finished, I assume.
Okay, in that case, last thing.
You're doing plugs.
Twitch camera.
You're doing plugs.
At Manyninjas on Twitter. I am Manyninjas.com for more videos and updates. And now we're done. How about you, Carlos?
So part of the Eastern Seaboard is buried in snow, but apparently Manyninja's mind was in a fog of snow and ice. But yeah, it'll be at Carlos Alcazar 2 on Twitter, carlosalcazar.org, where I try to put up the videos. Sometimes I fall a little bit behind. Obviously, you can go to the YouTube channel to see the latest, but I will try to update it with some links. I did do an unboxing and first impressions on the Retro Trail console myself. You can see some of our longer thoughts on it in a little stream we did on Manyninja's channel. I felt really good about the way it turned out, so I probably will do kind of a review now that I've had the chance to play with the system a little bit and kind of give my thoughts having actually used it for a little bit. It isn't going to be the main focus of what I put on the channel, but it's nice to have a little change of pace. I like to talk about some other stuff sometimes. So that'll be a thing. And then probably now that I have all the hardware set up so I can record some stuff, I may play some games there and do little reviews on some games that interest me. It'll be just here and there sporadic things, nothing too consistent necessarily, but I'd love to do it if I could. So that'll be it for me. So between myself and Manyninjas, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, or comment if you'd like to add something constructive. As you all know by this point, we don't show the movie because we'd like the video to stay up. But we do like to talk about it a little bit here and there, and that's what we do here. So for myself and Manyninjas, thank you for watching, and have yourself a great one. Say bye, Manyninjas.
Take care, everyone, and see you next time.